Well, what's up again there, guys? Brian here, the 3 Topics Game here, share with you in one of my worst best ranking videos to share with you guys today. And now that the Video Game Awards had just passed a number of days ago, I thought that this would be a pretty good time for me to just kind of go over and do my own personal ranking of all of the worst to best games I played this year, and we'll share just a few thoughts on each of the individual games because I know I didn't do a review for all these games, and share what I would have picked for my personal game of the year. Now, I will say that this was actually a pretty interesting year. I played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, about 11 different games that I think were kind of newish to me. And I think compared to how I think next year is going to be, which I'm not too excited for really, because I think 2024 is going to end up being probably one of the worst years of gaming, at least for me personally. I would say that we actually had a pretty great year in terms of gaming, at least for me personally. Now, if you do happen to enjoy this video, by the way, please do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. Keep tracking me on my future videos. And remember, if you guys have any ideas for future ranking videos or top 10 list videos or discussion videos in general, please let me know in the comments down below, and I will try to get it up as soon as I can, as well as to give you a shout out at the beginning of the video. So, starting off with what was my least favorite game that I played this year is gonna probably upset a lot of people, and I understand why, because a lot of people love this game. They think it's one of their favorite games, and it would have been their choice for Game of the Year. But unfortunately, the worst game that I played this year was Spider-Man 2. Gameplay wise, they tweaked it a little bit, so it really wasn't all that fun. It felt just a little bit off. Combat felt bad, for me at least. And I didn't like the story at all. And I ended up quitting this game about 25% in. Now, I did go ahead online and see how the whole story played out, and I could see that they were doing certain things, they were going in certain directions that I just didn't like. And when it comes to me, I'm a story-driven gamer first. Like, you could have the most clunkiest, horrible controls ever, but if you have a good enough story, I can push through. But if your story is not interesting at all, or you're clearly doing things that I don't agree with, or it seems like you have some kind of an agenda, or you're pushing some kind of message, that's the biggest turn off for me. And it was clear that Spider-Man 2 was going down that direction. So much so that I've stated this on multiple times. Whenever Spider-Man 3 does eventually come out, I have absolutely no interest to even give this game even a chance to see if it would work for me, because I probably know that story-wise it won't work for me at all, which is why for me, unfortunately, it was my least favorite game that I played this year. Going on into the next game, I believe it is going to have to also go to Diablo 4. I just couldn't push through this game. This was probably the first time I'd played a Diablo game for an extended period of time, and it really is the kind of game that I would have enjoyed and probably stuck with it more had I had a group of friends to play it with. I mean, going through these caves and traveling through these dungeons and going through these houses. Combat-wise, I got it down pretty well, and I didn't get the story too much. The story was okay. It just wasn't interesting enough for me to stick with it for a long period of time. But I did hang on to this game for several weeks before I decided to return it. But yeah, I think personally Diablo is definitely something that is a lot more enjoyable playing with friends than just playing it completely by yourself. I know that a lot of players easily can play by themselves for long periods of time, but for a game like that, that is just something that I really personally could not pull off, which is why it is going to take the 10th spot on my list. Going on to number 9, I'm going to have to give it to Persona 4 Golden. This is also a game that I haven't really finished. I'm loving the game. I really am. I'm actually loving the game up to the point where I'm at. It's just, it was one of those games where it kind of got bogged down because newer games, more interesting games were coming out. I do think that this is a game I'm going to come back and eventually beat when I have a little bit more time. But overall, I was really loving Persona. I mean, artistically, visually, it's exactly the type of game I would have enjoyed. It's a JRPG, and heck, I absolutely love the Persona franchise, and I'm curious to see if I might even give the remake of Persona 3 coming out next year. I'm wondering if I'll give that a chance. Yeah, Persona 4 Golden. I'm decided that I'd beaten this game on Vita, so it's just a good chance to kind of revisit it, which is why I can't put it too high on my list. Going on to number 8, I'm actually going to have to give it to this Cyberpunk DLC, which is, I think it's like Liberty City Story or something, or Dogtown or something like that. It's amazing how it's taken Cyberpunk like 3 years to actually get to the position where this is what it should have been at launch. But I do like the DLC so far. Not only new characters, very cool weapons. It just kind of extends the best parts of Cyberpunk, and I really haven't had too many great issues. it's had multiple different updates even after they released the DLC that has actually extended. So I gotta give credit. Rough at launch, probably one of the buggiest games I played up to that point. But if I were reviewing that game now, it would get a much higher score, and it's easily a game that I would honestly recommend to anyone who didn't chance or was pushed off that when it first came out. So yeah, I gotta give the Cyberpunk DLC as a number 8 on my list. Going on to number 7, I gotta give it to Mario RPG. This is a game that I'm just about to beat. I'm kind of on the last level, but I've had a blast playing this game. I loved playing this when I was younger. When it came out on the Super Nintendo when I was a kid. I loved playing updated versions of games that came out during that period, and this is just a perfect update to any of those type of games. Visually, it's great. Combat wise, it just plays out like a straight up RPG. The story is very, very simple to follow. The combat, the gameplay, all of these elements are very, very easy to follow. This is literally a JRPG that anyone who's even not a big fan or hasn't much experience with RPGs could easily pick up, play, and get used to it and have a lot of fun. There's definitely some replay values. I know there's some hidden bosses that I haven't found yet that I'm definitely going to go back and fight and hopefully have a chance to beat them again. But yeah, so far, if I get a chance to get around to eventually review this, I would give this a very, very high score, but it's going to have to hold the number 7 spot on my list. Going on to number 6 is a game that I did not expect to be as great as it was, and that is going to have to go to RoboCop Rogue City. I think when I have time, I do want to review this game, but boy, there were definitely some things about this game I didn't think would work as well as it did. One, as a first-person shooter, is great. They got a great collection of weapons, and the enemy variety is actually quite challenging. I mean, one of my biggest complaints going into this game was like, how can you possibly create any kind of threat to RoboCop when he's like supposed to be like bulletproof? But then as you progress through the game, they definitely add some enemy varieties that are pretty tough, and even for back in those days in the 80s, I would have been like, okay, yeah, RoboCop would definitely have some problems taking on enemies like this, and with the type of serious firepower they're bringing, like, oh yeah, RoboCop would need to really be on his A game, otherwise he's gonna get shot up. Like, yeah, this stuff would definitely cause some serious damage to him. And I absolutely love the storytelling in this game. I love how there's certain elements that allow you to kind of change how the ending is. It gives you kind of a little bit more personality for RoboCop and giving you choices in certain conversations of certain characters throughout the game, and it actually can have effect on certain plot points. And that's something I really did not expect from a game like this. I thought it was going to be a little bit too straightforward, but there's actually some areas that are actually quite open. There's plenty of side quest missions that will reward you, and the customizations for your auto gun is insane. Though this is definitely a game I would highly recommend for anyone who's curious. This is easily one of the biggest surprises of the year, and yeah, I would highly recommend RoboCop Rogue City. It's giving it the 6th spot on my list. Going into number 5, I'm gonna have to give it to Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Gameplay-wise, I think it was a big improvement over Fallen Order. Story-wise, I do think it did drag a little bit too long, and I didn't really like the kind of constant jumping between a small portion of planets more often. I mean, I know we did that in Jedi Survivor, but it just felt a little bit more balanced. This time, it was just kind of more noticeable, and it got kind of annoying. I think the progression of characters with Cal Kestis and the rest of the cast of the characters I thought was great. There were definitely a number of surprises. The music was great. The combat was great. It was overall a great follow-up story, just lacking a little bit in the story department, but it was still a great story, and I really cannot wait for them to release the 3rd part of this awesome sure-to-be trilogy, which is why it's going to get the number 5th spot on my list. Going on to number 4, I got to give it to Mortal Kombat 1. I am still playing this now. I think this is next to Apex Legends, this is probably going to be my primary transitional game, and what that is it's pretty much a game that I go back and I play between the releases of main games, but seeing how next year might be a little bit rough for me, I actually can see myself playing this a lot more often. They've already kind of given us hints on showing us the rest of the DLC characters and what they can do. We've already seen a little bit of a number of them, and I really want to see how that continues on to next year. So yeah, Mortal Kombat 1 was a great Mortal Kombat game. I enjoyed it. Story was great. Combat was great. There were some side-ish things on the side that I didn't think worked too well, but I'm sure they could fix those with certain patches moving forward. But yeah, definitely Mortal Kombat 1 was a fantastic entry. Going on to number 3, I gotta give it to Hogwarts Legacy. Now, believe it or not, I've spoken to a lot of people, and they're surprised that this game came out this year because it felt like it came out a lot longer ago. But yeah, anyone who's a fan of the Harry Potter franchise, this was a must pick up. I absolutely loved playing this game. I hope they do a sequel. Story was great. Combat was very, very extensive. There is so many activities to do in this game. Visually, it is impressive. Like, this is the best amount of like Wizarding World content we've had since the last Harry Potter film came out. Like, I would easily pick Hogwarts Legacy over any of the Fantastic Beasts films that have come out. So, yeah, I gotta give it a number 3 spot on my list. Going on to number 2, I'm going to have to give that to Final Fantasy 16. This was a great game. I know this game, I think, won like 1 or 2 awards at the Video Game Awards. They weren't very like high-standing awards, but you know, it did win something. Yeah, I recently played the new DLC, the Echoes DLC, and boy, they definitely stepped up their game in terms of difficulty here. I felt like Final Fantasy 16, even with the second playthrough, was a bit easy, but this new DLC, boy, does it bring some serious challenges. And I really cannot wait for the next DLC that comes out when it comes out later on next year. So it's great that they're still giving up some pretty solid content for this ever-expanding game. But on its own, this is a fantastic Final Fantasy game. I do think it is seriously lacking in some of the RPG elements, specifically with the addition of the use of the party. I wish they had made them a little bit more important, or at least they'd kind of integrate them a little bit better instead of just having like 3 or 4 random characters that, you know, the enemy can actually kind of target them and just ignore you. Therefore, the combat's a little bit easier. And because you never have to worry about your party members, it kind of feels like, why are they even there? So, I mean, they can help in some sense to distract the enemy, but I just kind of wish that I'd have to worry about them a little bit more instead of them just being just side characters. They're just there for support. But overall, I still think that I do think if this is not a top 5 Final Fantasy game, this would easily hold like the number 6 spot. There's just some areas compared to other Final Fantasies that I think it's a little bit lacking. But overall, this is still a fantastically well-made game. It has by far my best use of summonings in the entire franchise by a long shot, and I know we're going to get a little bit more of that in the next DLC, and that's something I'm really pumped up to see. So yeah, that was easily the second best game I played this year. But easily, by far, the best game I played this year, and the game that I would have picked for my game of the year, would have to be the Dead Space remake. It is incredibly rare for them to make a remake that, in my opinion, actually surpasses the original. It makes some serious improvements, and it actually does a better job connecting it to the sequel, which personally I don't think they should remake the sequel. I would really be more open for a Dead Space 4 so we can get a conclusion, or we can follow up on the twist ending of Dead Space 3. But yeah, this was definitely a much better game than the original. I played this multiple times. I think the sound aesthetic, the visuals, the atmosphere that's set up, the combat system, everything. And I like how it's so familiar, but they were able to kind of trick me with me being so familiar. So at certain points, I would think, oh, I just need to do this way, or the enemy is going to come out from this direction because I know this area so well from playing the original. And yet they would kind of throw me off my guard. And the fact that no matter how much you travel through the Ishimura, it was always a surprise. You always had to keep yourself on your toes, and that's something that the original didn't have. And I think Isaac Clarke is a much more realized character in this game than he was in the original, even though how they handled Isaac in the original was kind of okay in terms of this type of storytelling they were doing, but this was a major improvement. I also got a collector's edition for this, which is easily one of the best collector's editions I've ever gotten, but yeah, if I had to pick what was my personal game of the year, it would have to go to Dead Space 1 Remake. So that is my personal ranking of worst to best games I played this year. I would like to know, what were some of the best and worst games that you played this year, and what would you pick as your personal game of the year? Let me know in the comments down below. And like always, thank you guys for watching. You're awesome, and I'll see you next time.